As a first step for building a global cluster, we're first going to need to build a local regional cluster and then build from there. This is somewhat the most time-consuming step because we cannot do this in parallel with any other steps. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to first do a create database. Let's close that out. I'm going to pick Aurora. In this case, I'm going to use for Postgres. We're going to come here to show filters and make sure we're only showing the global database available versions, and I'm just going to pick the newest one. As this is for test, I'm selecting test. This is the database cluster identifier. Just for simplicity, what we want, because it is going to be global, we want to identify it based on the region we're in. So US West 2. I'll username of Postgres. I'm going to set the password. Okay, I'm going to leave the database type as R6G large. As a note, these R6G larges in testing by us and our customers, we're finding they are very good and very cost effective, or any of the Graviton 2 instances are very cost effective. We are not going to build a multi-AZ deployment for now. We're going to do that. Each step is going to be done individually so that we have easy and full access to the names. As a note, once you put your databases into a global cluster, you cannot rename them. So naming each instance as you actually want them to be named is very important. Okay. Also, public access. We're going to set this to yes. Because we have not gone through and actually reassigned public or addresses to our subnets to ensure that the private IP ranges do not overlap between VPCs across regions. We're going to need to use public routing of IPs in order to connect everything or connect to the entire cluster. So we want those to be assigned public IPs. Security group, we have predefined an open group. Yeah, that's a security risk as well. But something just for simplicity we're going to do. And then we're going to put that in US West 1, or yeah, zone 2A, sorry. Database port 5432. And then an additional configuration, we're not going to worry about the initial database. We're going to come down. We don't care about the backups for this. We don't care about encryption. We don't care about performance insights. And we don't care about enhanced monitoring since this is simply a test configuration. And we don't even want to worry about the minor version upgrades. We're now going to create the database. Okay, and it is now starting. And eventually, if we wait long enough, the primary writer will come online and then we can start working on our next steps. And now we have a complete instance. The first thing that we're going to do, because we're not able to pick the name of this instance, is we are going to rename it. So we're going to come on over here. We're going to modify this instance. Wait a moment. And I'm simply going to name it US West 2A because that's where it's at. We're going to continue, apply immediately. And we're going to wait for it to be renamed. And renaming is now done. Okay, now that we have a completely created regional cluster, we have appropriate naming, and that's important. Once you create the global cluster, you can't do renames. We can now do our global cluster creation. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here, we're going to select our regional cluster. We're going to do actions, and then we're going to add AWS region. Now, the first off, the global database name. This will be used to reference the global database once we create it. And as I mentioned before, with global names, you cannot change it. So just for testing, global, great. Okay, secondary region. What I'm going to do is I'm currently in US West 2, which you can see is not on the list. I am going to add Asia Pacific Sydney. Okay, I'm again going to use the R6G large. You'll notice it's not allowing us to select the version of database, and that's because it follows the global database type. We are not going to create a replica. We want to create replicas individually, again, because it allows us for naming control. Public access, we're going to follow through on that, yes. And, okay, existing VPC group. Note, we do not have an open here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do default for the moment. Availability zone, AP Southeast 2A. Database port, we're going to come down. DB Instance Identifier. This is the actual instance name. So I am creating in Sydney AP Southeast 2. I'm going to name this AP 2A because I'm creating this in 2A. DB Cluster Identifier. This is going to be the regional cluster identifier. And I think that this is confusing. You're naming the regional cluster after you're naming the instance that goes into the cluster. I'd like to see this changed, but that's what it is. So I'm going to name that AP Southeast 2. We're again going to kind of remove all these optional things that we don't want. Okay, now I'm going to add region. Okay, and we can see that we got our naming correct. The region name is the cluster name for the regional cluster name, and 2A names the actual availability zone that our cluster is in. Now, while that's being created, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on over here to EC2. I'm going to go to my Sydney region. I am going to come to security groups. I'm going to create security group. Open, open. I'm going to add inbound rule of all traffic. Okay, and I'm going to create my group. Now I can go back to RDS. Okay, and you can see it's still modifying the US West 2 cluster to be part of the global database. However, we are creating, and once it's created, we'll be able to modify the security group such that it is open as well. Now, while we wait for the Sydney database to come online so that we can adjust the security group, I'm actually going to come in and we can start the next step as well, which is to create the Mumbai cluster. So we're going to add yet another region. We're going to come in. We're going to add in Mumbai. Again, same size. We're not going to create an Aurora cluster. subnet group. We're going to make it public. Here I have a predefined open security group. And again, we're going to put this in South 1A. We're going to come in. DB Instance Identifier. Again, this is the database. So we're going to again look at AP South 1A. AP AP South 1. Okay, everything's good. The interesting thing is we can create a new regions cluster from anywhere, but any maintenance you do will have to be done from that region. Okay. It's now showing that the cluster here, the secondary cluster for Sydney, is online, but the instance itself is not. Okay. And we need to wait until this is online for us to modify the security group. So we'll just go back to the global database. And we can refresh them from here. Okay, and we now have the entire cluster available in Sydney. So we're going to come in, we're going to go in, we're going to modify the cluster member, and we are going to add or adjust the security group. Removing default and adding open. And we're going to apply that immediately. And at this point, if we just wait for a couple of minutes, the entire cluster will be available and online and globally available.